Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. I am Craig, your host. Over there, well, I don't know. So I want to make a Cubs joke about how you're not that young anymore. We can't even call you a Cub. It's Kenn Johnson.
That's true. Just the old bear. That's me.
You're no Todd. Let's put it that way.
I'm close. I'm close to Todd. Hey, you're closing in on Todd.
Nobody's
when we
closing in on
started this
Todd.
thing, you were the young pup when we started this thing.
Ain't that the truth? And joining us today for our discussion of Mossflower is so we're in keeping with our tradition of bringing on tradition, we've done it once. Our new tradition of bringing on a patron for these GoFundMe episodes. It's Levi, aka Texas Blade. How you doing, Levi?
I'm doing great.
So you are an AKA. People know you as Texas Blade. And I think, honestly, anybody who is a denizen of Discord would be surprised, honestly, that you're here for this episode. Because Mossflower, this book that I'm holding in my hand, you'll notice that the author of Mossflower is Brian Jacques. The author of Mossflower is not one Jim Butcher. So I'm shocked that we got you on to this episode, but hey,
I would. We can talk about that later. I don't know. I was gonna say there's a few other books I could definitely get into, like of course I'm gonna forget now, but the Alex Virus. Check that out.
Sure.
Particularly since it's a finished book series and it doesn't get enough love. Sure.
It's just, there are a few characters on Discord that are defined by a certain overriding characteristic. And, there are a lot of names that I recognize, but a lot of them are kind of undifferentiated in my mind. They don't have some defining characteristic. You do. And it was your enthusiastic love of Jim Butcher, so or at least Jim Butcher's books. I don't know how you feel about the guy.
Yeah, I'm not sad about that.
So, guys, we're talking Mossflower, of course, as I've said a couple of times. Before we do, though, I want to remind everybody to go to thelegendarium.com to check out past episodes, the calendar for future episodes, as well as links to Discord and Patreon. If you have $1 to spare to throw in the tip jar, please do so. I have another episode with Todd that will be coming out shortly on that thing I just said. What's it called? Patreon. Todd is doing his Wheel of Time read through, and we've had some fun talking about that. I think we went up through book 4. So we have another episode coming out there. So if that's Patreon only. So if you are interested in that, and you should be, it is fun to listen to Todd talk about it. You should check that out. Just as an aside, it's the most Todd thing ever, you guys. This is a little tease to get people to go check it out on Patreon, because there are characters in the Wheel of Time that everybody loves, and then there are characters that everybody hates. Todd loves everyone with an equal passion. Todd is incapable of hatred. He is capable of plenty of tears, but no hatred. So it's hilarious to listen to him read this with no outside context of what everybody else thinks of the series. Sweet. It's great. All right, guys.
His favorite character is Uno.
Yeah, we're not talking about the show right now. Kenn, Mossflower. Hey, do you want to catch us up with a little recap of Mossflower?
So yeah, I do actually. There was this book called Redwall. You guys all read it.
Lean into that mic for me, Kenn. Give me a little volume here.
This
give me a
mic
little
right here.
Yeah.
You want me to lean into this mic?
I want you to serenade me with your sultry, dulcet tones.
Hey, Mike. I can't. I just can't.
Don't do it.
I can't. All right. Rare are the moments that you get a prequel that is better and more compelling than the main story. I'm struggling to find one, maybe 1883 over Yellowstone, but that's television. What does it matter?
Wow.
But Here we are, generations before the feats at Redwall Monastery in a relatively civilized Mossflower wood. It was a lawless time where innocent lower on the food chain animals risk their lives just by leaving their dens for fear of being evolved. I don't think I meant to say evolved. I don't think I meant to say that.
How about devoured?
Let's go with devoured.
Enslaved.
Let's go with enslaved by the forces of tyrant Wildcat Verdoga. I didn't know how to pronounce that. We're gonna go with Verdoga and his children. Seems like a fine time for a young Martin the warrior to roll into town full of piss and vinegar and ready to bust the heads of all comers. And boy, does he go straight for the head. Verdoga's ready to lock Martin up and let him go after a time because he's a nice guy like that for a tyrant. But too bad his daughter and her bestie have been actively conspiring to poison Daddy and quite hostilely take over. She kills her dad, locks up her brother, proceeds to claim Mossflower for her only one problem. Well, actually 1,000 little problems. Sarmina didn't kill Martin when she had the chance, and now he's going to inspire the Mossflower furry creatures to rise up, organize, and make the woods safe again. Spoiler alert, we've already seen the end result, but it's really fun to watch or read, in this case, how we get there. If you're paying any attention, you'll notice that the recap focuses pretty much on the first act of the book. That's because the rest of the book is pretty much just good old-fashioned punching. I love it. Okay, not quite all of it, but most of it, kind of. He meets the residents. They organize a rescue mission is hatched. Martin heads out on the hero's journey. There's fire, there's floods, there's a pirate ship, snakes, frogs, a freaking eagle looming like silent death over everything without regard to party or prejudice. And in the end, he makes good on his promise to kill the Wildcat. Sorta. It's kind of a cop-out. I wanted him to see him use that sword. But anyway, it was all really good.
It was great.
At the end.
Did you? Oh, now you usually end with questions. No questions on your part.
I got no questions.
That's okay. That's okay.
I wanted to. I think of some questions, but this book series goes backward, and so I wasn't really sure how to ask my questions.
I can think of one question.
Go for it.
All right.
How big is Redwall? Because they're making it. They're going to make it at the end of this book, and I feel like in Redwall, the book, it feels so much like it's a huge monastery because there's birds living like way high up in like almost a different realm. But apparently the mice made it. So that kind of ruined my like, okay, they must have like gone absolutely bonkers to make this thing. And so many other things.
So are you familiar with what an abbey actually is? IRL?
Mm-hmm.
I more or less, I think. I'm thinking Alamo-esque things for some reason.
So it's a monastery. So it's a religious building. Think like a large church or cathedral, but with a ton of space for, or comparatively, a ton of space for residents.
Internet. Let me just do a little look.
Yeah, it's meant for monks and nuns and abbots, etc., to live there, right? And so
spiritual enlightenment.
It is. It can be huge. My favorite abbey in the world is the Mont Saint Michel. So people can look that up. You've probably seen pictures of it. It's the island about half mile out from the coast of northern France, and it's built on this floodplain where when the tide comes in, it's an island surrounded by water, and when the tide goes out, it's you can't even see the shore almost. It goes so far out. It's incredible. One of the wonders of the world for sure. But it's this island on top of which is an abbey and a large church as well to go with it. Anyway, so it's really cool. That would not be your standard example of an abbey, but it's one of the most striking ones.
Yeah, I'm seeing cathedrals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Here is one question for you guys that I started thinking midway through this book and partly thinking of the last book. Originally, I thought Redwall, you know how in a lot of these anthropomorphized stories, it's these mice or these animals acting like humans that are living in a human's world, but so I thought maybe Redwall was like a wall built by humans, and these animals are living inside
Exactly.
of it. Clearly, this is world built by animals. So, what kind of scale are we looking at here?
Exactly.
It does become clear. I want to say if you're reading closely, you can tell in this book, but I know throughout the series it does become very clear that yes, they are building all this stuff themselves. They're building their pirate ships. They're building the abbeys and the castles and all that, and they're doing it at woodland creature scale. So this is not the size of Somerset Abbey or whatever it's called. These are little animal-sized places. So.
It still must have been a big abbey because, like I said, the birds were up top and they had their own domain there. So
if you've ever been,
they also have the cart and the horse. And the cart had hundreds and hundreds of rats in it.
Right.
Sorry, going back to the original Redwall. So that seems very much like a human size.
That was a human sized cart, being pulled by a horse. Yeah,
and it also makes you wonder: is the horse intelligent, or are there some dumb animals as well? Birds sometimes. Some predators.
It sure seems that way.
Yeah,
because when they meet the toads. There's
there's some intelligence. They're not some intelligence there, but animals.
But nobody's like sad when the snake just eats all the toads. Like, hey, thanks for dinner. And everybody's like, okay, well, they're just toads.
Yeah. Amphibians and reptiles seem to lean mostly towards the not so. It's like it seems like Well, see. I'm borrowing from other books that will be and were but aren't going to be covered anymore, so I don't know. But yeah, it seems like the reptiles and amphibians are kind of the shifty ones, and then vermin and predators. Well, I guess some predators seem to oscillate. Some predators are good, some predators not so much. And, So
it gets
quite a similar pecking order, but not. Also,
I feel like squirrels are elves.
Squirrels are elves? Okay. Just because they have bows?
Well, and they live in the trees all the time. So
Fair enough.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder what Lord of the Rings as a Redwall book would be like, or Stormlight Archive as Redwall.
I was going to say, what's the other animals, but not Wind in the Willows or...
that's one.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, there are any number of.
Yeah.
Well, I did the Author's Shelf Tail Chaser song, Tad Williams. That is a really bizarre, coked up version of the Lord of the Rings with cats in the woods. So that one is I don't know what he was on when he wrote that, but it's bananas. Anyway, okay, so maybe we start into talking about this book toward the beginning. Let's talk about some characters, but starting with not the very first character we meet, but one of the first, which is Martin the Warrior. Yep. So he is the fabled hero that in the original Redwall, everybody looks back on as this kind of messianic figure. And people who read the book, they remember. Okay, so that's Martin the Warrior. Now we get his story. He arrives in Mossflower Wood and gets thrown in prison, gets out of prison, and then goes on his grand adventure. Kenn, how did you like Martin? Did he live up to your expectations from what you had in Redwall? What'd you think?
He did live up to my expectations. Primarily because this is kind of what I expect from a hero's journey story when we see prior to them becoming the hero. The hero, I guess the way I said it is the way I meant it. But in Redwall, he's lionized. He's done all of these amazing things. I mean, he's revered as almost a hallowed figure, and we get to see now how he gets to be that way. And it's fun to see a story like that, especially in this experience, in this case where he has some flaws. I mean, he's brash, he's arrogant, he's loud, he's not, he flies off the handle. I mean, he probably, and we see later in the book that he doesn't always solve everything with the turn of a blade, but this seems to be his default setting, at least when we first meet him. He's like, I'm gonna cause some reckoning here, and
He is
Well,
attached.
that's basically how we first meet him, which is great.
he is that way all the way to the end of the book, right? His whole when they finally succeed in flooding the castle Cotier, right? And Sarmina, who we'll definitely get to, she's drifting along on a piece of wreckage, and he's just taunting her. He's yelling jabs and jibes at her. Like,
he made her a promise.
Yeah,
Can't let her get away.
Right. Anyway, but he's no shrinking violet.
Aside from that moment in the middle where they're being followed by the they're not weasels, but the rats, I guess. I can't remember specifically what kind of rodentia they are, but when they're being followed on their way to Badgerland, he says, now's not the time to fight. We keep, pushing on. Like, okay, there's a little bit of moderation, and he isn't just a mindless let's kill first and ask questions later. He actually has some tactics and some strategy in there, and I like
he gives Sarmina a chance to leave peacefully, and he does the honorable thing, but he doesn't shrink from battle either.
Yeah, he may be an honorable warrior, but he's still a warrior first, right?
Warrior first.
I was trying to think of trying to put myself in that 9-year-old mindset, reading this book for the first time and thinking of Martin as myself as a 9-year-old boy would have perceived him, which is, by the way, about the time that I got this. This is the only mass market hardback that I own, by the way. I love it. Wow. But this very copy was one of the first, long books I ever read. Anyway, so trying to put myself back in that mindset. And I remember talking in the previous episode with Panda about Matthias and how Matthias he oscillates between being kind of a bumbling fool of a young mouse and being very capable and tough and coordinated, when he's getting in fights and whatnot. He's always going back and forth between those two things. And with Martin, he is much more kind of down the line assured. He's capable, he's tough, he understands, he may not understand everything about the situation, like when he gets thrown in prison, but he's able to take care of himself at any given moment. He doesn't require, an abbot to look after him the way Matthias did. And so it's interesting to kind of look at those two, especially because there are going to be so many similarities between these two books and every other book in the series. It's nice to have a protagonist who's a little bit different than what we just had, even if there are obvious echoes, right?
It felt, for lack of a better term, it felt almost a little bit plot armory. Only because we know that he's got to, continue on and do other stuff. But I mean,
hi Ken, welcome to prequels.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, and that's a prequel. But at the same time, I liked the fact, and I think we talked about this in Redwall also, that Brian Jacques seems to write these a little more cut and dried. A little more, the good guys are good, the bad guys are bad, and there's very little in between that we have to nitpick. I liked that, especially for Martin, because a lot of these prequels that we read in the jaded times that we live in are, this is the legend of the man. Well, the man really wasn't all that good, and he did some questionable things, and now we have to highlight all the questionable things,
or the other way around, right? Hellzibah was just misunderstood, or was that her name? Did I get the name right?
Say that again.
Is it Hellzibah? The in Wicked.
Oh yeah. Elphaba. Yeah.
Elphaba.
Yeah. Or that. It's like, the bad guys aren't really bad. They're just misunderstood. And the good guys weren't really good. They did some questionable things. And here's a character that you can give to a 9-year-old Craig and say, look, good people can become great people. Just let them. Right. Let this story have a good guy for the sake of being a good guy. Yeah. And I love it. And Sarmina on the other side.
Stop there. I want to get to Sarmina later. I want to stick with the
Okay.
good guys. She's
Let's
one of my
she's
favorites.
not a good guy.
Okay.
She's not a good guy.
She's not a good guy. That's true.
All right.
No, she's one of my favorites, and I want to give her due, but I want to stick with the good guys first. So,
All right.
Levi, Texas Blade,
Yes.
Senor Tejas. Favorite other noble character outside of Martin?
See.
He's thinking so hard, you guys. He's thinking so hard. There's actual
Love it.
steam coming off of
brain
his
is working.
headphones here.
Oh, I think there's almost something to like about all the main good guys.
I'll tell you mine. While you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
Mine is Gonf. I love it. So
I felt that was so easy. I'm like, oh, I can't.
no,
believe that.
it's fine. It's fine. We should talk about Gonf because
Oh, of course.
this makes me think. So I looked it up. This was published in 1988, and when Kenn and I were at Live.
Yeah.
And let's see. So 1988. This was at the height of Dungeons and Dragons powers, right, Kenn?
Yep.
And I was thinking about that because yes, there's lots of the Lord of the Rings in here, but then you have a character like Gonf, which makes me think of a D&D party in a stronger way than the Fellowship of the Ring does, right?
Yep.
Where you have the rogue thief character.
Bard.
I don't, would Gonf be, I don't know if I'd call him comedic relief, or what is that what the phrase? Whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's pretty comedic, but really he's just fun. It's not that he's funny all the time. He's just fun. He's always ready with a little quip or a smirk or whatever. He never seems to be down. And yeah, what a fun character to write, I'm sure, to throw into these scenes. And kind of to offset the serious warrior of Martin, right? I love that guy.
Yeah.
I liked to see him as Wayne without the traumatic backstory.
Nice.
And I also find it interesting that he's the one that gets the girl in this one. It's not Martin that gets the girl. So
yeah.
Does Martin ever marry? I don't think he does, as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't
These
think
things
so.
matter.
I think Redwall is the only one I read when I was a little kid, and I didn't get around to it. I think my brother was into he did a whole bunch of them. That was his big old series, and I just never got around to it for some reason.
Yeah.
But
did you think of a favorite of yours?
Oh, I might choose the Badger King.
Yes.
He's pretty sweet.
The
hairs are also pretty fun, though they kind of all go in as a clump, I'd say, because I don't think one of them stands out more than any others.
Which is really true of a lot of these species, right? It's like, oh yeah, you've met one stoat, you've met all stoats.
Right.
But Boar the Fighter, that's a strong choice.
Although Boar the Fighter, he did seem a cut above.
So yeah, tell me more. Why do you pick Boar the Fighter?
Oh, he has the mastery and has the prophecies there, and he's willing to just go for that and stuff. And he's the leadership type symbol he is.
He really, when you finally meet Boar the Fighter, because you've heard of him, hey, we need this guy. He's going to save us all. You need to go get him. He's this larger-than-life mythological figure. Bring him back, save us all. And you meet him, and he is that. It's not kind of what Kenn was talking about before, where, we cut the mythological figure down to size. No, you meet Boar the Fighter, and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is amazing. I love... Excuse me. I'm getting over the flu, so I'm going to be coughing a lot.
Stop being sick. It's not healthy.
You tell me about it. But one of the reasons I love scenes, especially when we first meet Boar the Fighter and all of his scenes, is that up to now we've really known two Badgers. I can't remember the name of the one in Redwall, but in this book we have Bella the Badger, who's kind of we have a very, very mild frame story where Bella is telling this story to somebody's grandkid. I can't remember who's.
Gomph's grandkid.
Gomph, yeah, that's right. Gomph's grandkid.
Okay, yeah.
And
like 5 years later, because they're mice.
Right. And so we get, like in Redwall, we get some glimpses of ferocity, like badger ferocity. And in this one, we get glimpses, but then you get to Boar the Fighter and you're like, oh, badgers. And it reminded me of why I don't know if I read as many as your brother did, Levi, but when I was a kid, I probably read like 10 of these books. I loved them. and I just remember loving the badgers. And that's why they just seem so badass, or whatever my phrasing my 9-year-old brain could have come up with for that.
Kind of the barbarians of the as in like a D&D class,
right?
Type kind of thing.
Yeah, but like noble barbarians, like Conan the Barbarians. there are badgers. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead and before we do locations and events, let's talk bad guys.
Really quick. My favorite character was Mask.
Oh, okay.
Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
anyway.
another good one. Very good one.
Just because I just love I love costumes and I love the spycraft stuff, and so it spoke to the 9-year-old me inside my 50-year-old brain.
And I love how Mask is unmasked, where it's so lame. It's like a banana peel moment. Like, oops, I slipped on a banana peel. Somebody steps on his fake tail.
Something so innocent.
Yeah, and it's like, better run.
Well, and his death was a great moment of gravity in a story that is typically pretty light, even with all of the action.
Yeah,
and he gives it some weight, and all of the characters just think the world of him. I liked Mask. I thought he was a great character. Anyway, let's talk bad guys.
He's great. Yeah, let's talk bad guys. Sarmina. First of all, what a name. When I was a kid, I had no idea what to do with that T. I was like, why is there a T there? I don't understand. Somebody told me it was pronounced Sarmina, and I just accepted that and said, okay.
And I had no idea what T you're talking about because I did audiobook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's well, that's the thing is he named her Tsar, Tsar, as in Russian despot, Tsarmina. And
a little on the
obviously,
nose, but
Oh, well, that's the thing. I love that.
Exactly.
Because when I was 9, I had no idea what a Tsar was. I barely heard of Russia at this point. I had no idea what that was. But I loved this book. And it had this kind of evil, despotic cat character named Sarmina. And I was very familiar with that. So that when I got to, junior high, high school, whenever it was that I learned about the Tsars, I had at least a cartoon version of that in my head already. Do you want to use the Redwall series as the basis for your understanding of real world history? No, of course you don't. But it can at least familiarize you with some of these terms, right?
Right.
And so I found it charming and valuable in that way. I don't care if it's on the nose. Who cares?
And isn't that what fiction is? That's what stories are supposed to do anyway.
At least, especially at this age.
Something to,
Yeah.
So, I didn't care either that it was on the nose. It was perfect. And she was excellent as a bad
Zarmina is what you're saying. It's in the book, or it's at least spelled Zarmina.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to say the book audiobooks. At least I kept hearing Sarmina, like an S.
Yeah,
but it could have easily been Tsar too, or I don't know.
It depends on which country or pronunciation.
Okay.
He went with TSAR versus CZAR, and so whatever. Okay. Take your pick.
Okay.
So I'll tell you. First of all, I love her because she is. There are no bones about her. She's a bad guy. There's no subtlety. There's no intrigue. There's just bad guy. But I also love the way that he works in these kind of life lessons for kids. And we talked about this a little bit in Redwall as well. But with Zarmina, she is great because he naturally fits in this fear. She has a fear of drowning. She keeps having these dreams. I'm going to drown. I'm terrified. This is awful. What am I going to do? And then at the end of the book, spoiler alert, she drowns. But her fear of drowning drives her to say and do really, really stupid, terrible things. And it was this great kind of like lesson for a kid that, like, look, scary things happen. Fear is not such a bad thing, but as I'm fond of saying, all poisons are determined by the dosage. Some fear can be healthy, but too much fear, and it's a pretty low dose, so you don't have to go very far before it's too much fear and it's driving you and making your decisions for you. And she's a great illustration of that principle, where fear is a bad motivator outside of maybe getting you out of an immediately terrible situation, right?
It's the mind killer.
Tell us more about fear being a mind killer, Ken.
You'll be able to see it more coming up in the beginning of the next year.
There's also, sorry, I know I'm monologuing a little bit, but I just love the Sarmina character so much. The other thing that I enjoy is the juxtaposition between her and her father. What's his name? Verdoga?
Verdoga.
What a name, by the way. Where this is, it's a great, again, very clear cut, not subtle, not nuanced description of one of the perils of despotism or authoritarianism, or whatever word you want to use for that. When you have a dictator, things could be okay. There are such things as benevolent dictators, people who, it's not so bad. Like the good czar would be a great phrase to throw in here, right?
The good czar Verdoga, whatever.
Where you can have that benevolent dictator, but the problem with the dictatorship is that dictator ain't going to be around forever. And so when we start the book, he's already kind of on his deathbed, and we see this forest, this Mossflower wood in disarray, this kingdom of Kotir in disarray, because Sarmina presumably has been kind of ruling by proxy for a little while.
Right.
Where it again, great illustration of that very simple principle, which is authoritarianism. It isn't inherently bad on its own terms. It's just that the risk reward ratio is way, way, way off. Right.
Yeah, you're one bad authoritarian away from a bad situation.
Exactly.
Quick change.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to kick it to you guys. Bad guy characters, whether it's Sarmina or somebody else. What do you like? What didn't work for you? Anything you want to talk about?
Do you think she's a little bit more complex than
Clooney
the Scourge? I feel like she's not quite as crazy in some ways.
I gotta think about this. What
Respectfully,
do you think,
I disagree. I don't say I disagree. I see it from a different point of view. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Is this where I put on my Jedi robes?
Yes, a certain point of view. I feel like she is more unhinged than Clooney. So
really, okay,
I do. I feel like all of her motivations are driven from a sense of inadequacy or a sense of impulse, I guess, for lack of a better word. She doesn't seem like a very good leader. She seems like a very selfish leader, which, I mean, bad guy leaders are supposedly by their very nature, selfish. But all of her things, all of her decisions are made to look tough or to get what she wants or to punish somebody who's not listening to her, and they don't seem well thought out from one to the next to the next. And Clooney's, they all seemed kind of malevolent. So yeah, he was a bad guy and he was probably crazy, but he was crazy because he was maniacal, not because he was insane. Does
Well,
that make sense?
he was trying to get power. She was trying to keep power. She already had
Right.
the power, kind of thing. There's that difference.
That is a good difference.
Can we assume that she grew up as like a princess, basically? Because she kind of acts that way, right? Like
I mean, you would think that Mossflower
her dad has
would have
been ruling for a while, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's what I see.
girl.
I think that's an astute point that she is trying to keep power versus gain power, where Clooney is he has a focus and a determination to achieve a goal, where her goal is like to re-subjugate the denizens of Mossflower so that she can keep living the cushy life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I feel like she's slightly more complex, but then again, it's been a few months since.
I thought Clooney was appropriately complex. Where, I mean, again, all of these characters and all of these stories are very simple. Okay, so we use this word advisedly, but he's a little more complex than maybe we're giving him credit for, just because he was so. He was plagued by his own fears and his own insecurities about Martin the Warrior and the legends and the legends of Martin and also the legend of Clooney the Scourge, right? And trying to stay ahead of that crumbling down. Anyway, I like them both quite a bit. And then there's her brother. I'm trying to remember his name. Gingerveer. Gingerveer.
He's cool. I wanted to call him Gingerwine. Or Genuine, the singer. I don't know why.
Singer. Nice.
One of the examples of a good predator in the series. Theoretically,
I would have liked to know more about his backstory, because clearly he was set up to be the good son who was going to continue to be the benevolent dictator, the kind authoritarian, as it were. Or maybe he would have gotten power and said, Mossflower, you're free, or something. At least that's the way he is lionized based on his actions after captivity. So to speak, lionized cat. But it could have been only that, I'm in captivity now. Now I am a good guy,
No, Ken. He was in captivity.
Captivity. Sorry.
Come on. You got to keep up. Hey. How many kids do you have, Ken?
4.5.
4? Your pun game is shockingly weak, okay? You got to pick it up. Let's go.
They're all grown up. I mean, I don't have to dad pun as much anymore.
That makes it better, right? If they're more embarrassed by it?
That's true. Okay. You raised some good points, John. I mean, your name's not John, but...
Well, yeah, what are you referencing there?
That's an inside joke with my family, and I wish you guys...
Thanks for bringing it up.
No, yeah, sorry.
No, it's kind of similar to the idea of dictatorships eventually always turning sour, right? There's also a similarly simple lesson in here that both of these characters, Gingerveer and Sarmina, grew up in the same place with the same father, with the same circumstances, and he did not you don't have to be the way that your circumstances push you toward. You can make other choices. You can decide to be a better person, right? So he's great.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the adventure at all? The Martin's quest.
That's a good section of the book, so we probably should.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's as I was going through it, I had forgotten how much of the book that actually takes up. Where in my memory was dominated by Cotier Castle and sneaking through and busting out of prison and all that stuff. The battles at the end, the fight with Sarmina. But no, there's this massive section that takes up all of part 2 and most of, and a good chunk of part 3.
Start of part 3.
This quest. I loved it. Any standout moments or images?
It took me way too long to figure out the bats were bats, I'd say, the first time.
What do they call them?
Shoot, how does it go?
I can't. I read this one pretty quick.
Yeah, it took... I went through it twice, but oops. But it was still a while ago when I started my Cinder Spires re-listen recently.
Mm.
So, but I know it talks about it. I think it calls them kind of like mice, and then I'm blanking.
Right.
I'm blanking. I don't have print copy of it either,
No,
so I can't look it up.
the bats are great, and especially because in that scene we get the owl as well, and he does a great job, I think, of drawing a picture of this ultimate apex predator who is so untouchable that this whole massive horde of bats is like, nope, not happening. We're not taking that dude on. He will wipe us all out. No, thank you, sir. And it's one owl sitting like just outside the entrance, right? They're like, nope, pass. So he does. I think he does a great job of bringing in a few natural elements like the owl or like the pike, where it's this animal that to these little mice and moles and whatnot, these animals are so terrifying. They are so, they're like gods. This owl is like a god that sits above the fray of whatever's happening in this story.
What's the sea rat? Giant sea rat was like the Merc or something like that.
Yeah.
The Sarmina's monster.
The Gloomer.
The Gloomer.
Yes.
That thing. It kind of reminded me of the dragon at the bottom of Gringotts in Harry Potter, where it was just like, it's supposed to be this big scary thing, but it's blind and deaf, and it just kind of wanders and stuff, and it's taken out really fast. Like, oh, well, that was.
And presumably it was intelligent at one time, because I mean, Clooney the Scourge was a sea rat. So,
right.
Though again, I guess this is a giant sea rat, so maybe.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah,
it was terrifying to the Rodentia, but to the reader, even probably a 9-year-old would be like, "Oh, well, that wasn't so bad." But
I think as a kid, I didn't even connect Sea Rat with Clooney. I like that went past me at the time. Who knows?
Well, and I think it takes you a while before they tell you it's a sea rat, and I thought they did a decent job of making it sound monstrous. And I think I may have missed it being called a sea rat the first time, and I was trying to think, what is this thing? But then like the second time through, I'm like, oh, there's sea rat. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the eagle's name?
Oh gosh, you're really taxing this old brain.
I know. I'm sitting here trying to remember. I'm like, oh, I love that character so much because I love the menace.
He's kind of I'd say he's neutral, but he never really goes after any of the good guys.
Yeah, he just sits up there.
He went in Pine Martin.
He loves Pine Martin, but
he wants to try Pine Martin. He never had Pine Martin before,
right? But he
was just really set on trying it.
I'm trying to find the name here.
But you know what? Actually, now that you say that, isn't he kind of the dragon character in our story? Because that's often when you read dragons in fiction.
Yes,
you come across the dragon, and the dragon isn't. It's not necessarily malicious. It is utterly natural, and it will follow its nature.
Like the great equalizer.
Ashleg, and so
that's his name.
Ashleg.
That's the Pine Martin.
Yeah, he's right.
Oh, Ashleg.
The Pine Martin's the one with the peg leg, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Because that's right.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the.
Oh, it's a G or something like that, isn't it?
It started with an A, but I can't. Oh well, I'm not. I'm not going to waste more time on this. Somebody can yell at me.
Let me go back to the quest and tell you something that I really like about this quest and reading through this quest. In another book, this quest would have driven me a little bit crazy, because when you're writing a book, you want every scene to serve a purpose, and usually that purpose is either I should say and or, right? So it's either and defining your characters and giving them character development, or pushing your plot along, or both, right? Preferably both, right? Every scene should accomplish these things. in this story, we go through like 3 or 4 different events on the way to Salamandastron, which we should definitely talk about.
That's a great name too.
We go through 3 or 4 different events where they run into this trouble, they get out of it. No, they're captured here and they get out of it, and then they're captured there and then they get out of it. Where these scenes in my mind didn't really differentiate from each other in that they weren't accomplishing different things. They weren't really furthering our characters or furthering the plot. But in this case, I find myself not really minding all that much because, again, putting myself in a kid's perspective, they're so vivid and they're so interesting just as scenes in themselves when they're stuck in the pit. And trying to figure out a way to get out of the pit, and then they get the mole. What's the mole's name? Oh gosh, no. Not Dinny.
Denny, yeah.
Denny, yeah.
Denny's gonna like tunnel their way out of this pit, right? So they got to figure out this clever way. But the imagery of the pit is so fascinating that I don't care that it's not really doing much else. And I might be shortchanging it a little bit, but probably not much. Anyway,
Argulor.
What's that?
Argulor is the bird's name.
Argulor. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, so I really like this, and then we get to Salamandastron, and we should probably talk about how they. Well, let me ask you this, Ken: is this the second Redwall book you've ever read?
It is.
Okay, Levi, how many have you read?
This I think was the second. And then I did Martin. I listened to Martin the Warrior after that, and then I got halfway through. What's the
Matineo?
Matineo, and that's going to be on pause for a little bit.
Right.
I have a lot of listening to do.
Point being, those like me who have read at least say a dozen of these books, you know how repetitive they are. You get a lot of the same kind of stock characters, a lot of the same stock action sequences. Obviously, with some variation. I mean, you don't get to 30 some odd books without some variation, but they're pretty standard throughout. And it's Mossflower that gives us that kind of blows open the world, because the book in Redwall that takes place in one field.
Yeah, it takes place
on the edge of the woods. And that's it. You have this one field. And now we have a much larger world to play in. And it will get larger still, but we get things like Salamandastron at the end of the quest. There's actually one of the books in the series is called Salamandastron, and it centers on the what are they called? The Badgers. And the retaking of the mountain. And there's some great stuff.
That sounds like a good one.
This book, this was actually, like I said, this was the actual copy that I had when I was 9, and it's the first one that I read. I read it before Redwall, and so I didn't really understand this when I was a kid. But now I kind of get that, the first one was where Brian Jacques said, I've got this idea. I want to do a talking animals book. Kind of medieval England, set in this abbey. The rats are the bad guys and the mice are the good guys, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I've got this idea. Great. Here's 300 pages on this idea. And then the next book he wrote was Mossflower, if I'm recalling correctly. And that's when he said, okay, so now that I've got my idea fleshed out, now I'm going to tell you a story, like a real quest story, kind of to a superior degree than what he did in Redwall, in my opinion. I really liked this book quite a bit. What do you guys think?
Oh, yeah.
Final thoughts. How did you feel, Levi, ultimately about reading through this, especially as an adult?
I enjoyed it, and it's just, enjoyed it enough that I re-listened to it not too long ago to try to freshen things up a little bit. And I'd probably re-listen to it again at some point, though. And yeah, it's good cast. And
This is like the definition of a comfort read, right? Like you could,
I would say so. Yeah.
if you talk about, maybe I'll listen to it again. It's not a long book. It's not a complex book. It's like, hey, you know what? I just got done reading Malazan #7. I need a palate cleanser. Throw on Mossflower and have a grand old time for a few hours, and then go back to whatever you were doing before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ken, we got the Levi read it as an adult. How about how does it hit as an old man, wrinkled and distraught?
I don't know. I would have to ask one. No, as an old man who's ready to give this to his grandchildren, I find this to be a very enjoyable book, and it's an enjoyable book. It's an enjoyable read as a grown up. If you have kids, this is a great book to read, to your kids, to get them involved in literature and reading. This is the textbook example for that. So plus I love the way that the stakes all build in this thing, and it just goes from, it basically doesn't slow down. It starts out fast, and that middle does not drag. It gets faster and it ends well. It's all a great book, and it's complete change from Redwall in the sense that things are dark and they get better, or they have problems for getting better.
I heartily agree with all that. As promised, at the end of the Redwall episode, I said I am definitely giving this to my 10-year-old son, and I did. He and I sat down and we've read. I think we read like the first quarter of it together, kind of alternating page by page, and that was a ton of fun. And then I said, okay, you're on your own. Go ahead and keep reading, give it a shot. And he's, I don't know, maybe halfway through the book now, and he's really enjoying it. So
nice.
Fast forward to, I guess it would have been, I don't know, however many weeks ago. This episode has been difficult to make, ladies and gentlemen. We've had to reschedule 2 or 3 times. It's been very frustrating. So a while ago, I was reading this on the couch, and he spotted, it's a kind of a convoluted cover. Those on YouTube can see what I'm holding up. And it says "Long Ago Before Redwall Abbey" in this kind of ornate script. And from across the room, he spotted the word Redwall, and he goes, "Oh, is that another Redwall book?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, finish the one you're doing, and then I'll give you this." And he was so excited. So that's just a little taste. Like it's interesting to come at it from our adult perspective and try to put ourselves in the mindset of a kid. But that's just a little bit of testimonial. Like, these are so fun for kids. And you read the opening sentence of a lot of kids' books. You know what they don't sound like? They don't sound like this. Late autumn winds sighed fitfully around the open gatehouse door, rustling brown gold leaves in the fading afternoon. Where this, again, not a complex sentence. This is not. It's not technically difficult or whatever, but it is. It is hinting at a literary aspect that a kid can just kind of dip his toe into, or her toe.
Yep.
Where you're drawing pictures with words and not worrying so much about illustrations and, the next frame in the comic or whatever. And I'm not disparaging those. I'm just saying this is a different form of writing that Brian Jacques does, I think, very, very well, where he can do something like that, draw a picture for you. That was in the prologue, the first paragraph of the actual, I won't read the whole thing, but the first paragraph of the first chapter. Mossflower lay deep in the grip of midwinter beneath a sky of leaden gray that showed tinges of scarlet and orange on the horizon. A cold mantle of snow draped the landscape, covering the flatlands to the west. Snow was everywhere, filling ditches, drifting high against hedgerows, making paths invisible, smoothing the contours of earth in its white embrace. Things like that, where it's accessible. It's just accessible enough for a kid, but pushes them just hard enough where they have to learn some new sentence constructions and make their brain kind of comprehend something that's not perfectly literal all the time, right?
Yep.
So such a hard recommend for these books. I can't even believe it.
And if
Ken, you look like you're going to say something.
If I may add, helps them to discover the art. And this is going to be my old man, get off my lawn complaint, in our TikTok generation and blah, blah, blah. It encourages the young mind to take those words and actually create the visualization themselves in their head. They don't need it on a screen or on a tablet or anything. It's just right there. It fosters imagination. It stokes critical thinking. I love it.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah.
Do you have TikTok downloaded on your phone?
I do not.
Good man. Good old man.
I
right.
don't. I refuse.
With that, you guys, let's call it quits there. I got to go record an episode with Drew, so we are going to leave it there. Let's see. Levi, Texas Blade, thank you so much for joining us on this one. Much appreciated. And Ken, are you ready to read Matameo?
Oh, I got it right here on my phone. I'm ready to go.
I think originally the plan was Martin the Warrior, which is actually, I think it's a prequel to this prequel. But then it was impressed upon me. What's that?
It's very interesting in a lot of it too, because it makes you wonder for a while, then wraps things up nicely in the end.
Yeah. It's a good book. I've definitely read it in the past, but Panda said, she said, look, you got to do Matameo instead. So I said, all right, I bow to, I am a slave to my patron's wishes, Ken. So that's what we're doing next.
All right.
So that means Alex Fierce is coming soon.
and that's why Levi's never coming back on the show. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to go to thelegendarium.com. And thanks for supporting the show, for sharing it out, and joining the conversation on Discord. We will see you all next time.
Have a good one.